Then Campaign 6 rolls around. Now, this was the very first campaign in which I GM'd, so it was a little bit rusty, but at the same time, I feel like it resulted in a fun, silly campaign. And this was called A Night to Remember. And it's in reference to the fact that our 4 characters this time around are a mercenary squad who woke up in the woods with a hangover, and they have no idea how exactly they got there. The only thing they know is that last night they had recently bagged a very high quality mercenary. They're sort of like mercenaries in that they take in criminals or people who are wanted and turn them in for money. They had a good bit of coin, they drank in a town, and somehow they wound up over here. Now, they essentially want to get back to civilization to sort of figure out why on earth they're in this position that they're in. Because they look at themselves, they're not missing anything. They're not missing any items on their person, they're not missing anything. They're just completely, they weren't robbed, they weren't killed in any way, shape, or form. All 4 of the characters on the Merc Squad are still alive, and they just sort of continue back to town trying to wonder what the hell just happened. Now, our 4 characters this time around are Zurojad, who is the Harpy member of the Rajak family. Yes, there's an actual Harpy class that I created. I believe I showed you, Sam and Ethan, that. As a Harpy, she was pretty good. She was the prepared character, I would say. She had a ton of accessories that were just for camping. She's constantly prepared to be in any circumstance. I believe she had a winter coat, so she was prepared that way. She had a bunch of camping supplies. She had a backpack. She had a compass. She was ready to camp, essentially. There was also Zuper's character. This is the first time we each spent a long time on the RP. Zuper's character was... I forget. Again, all of Zuper's names are very weird, so it's hard to remember them all. But he had a character that was essentially a mercenary flame swordsman of some form, I think. I don't actually remember. Zuper's character didn't get to do much. He had a donkey sister who was transformed into a donkey, and he also had a ticket for the lottery that he constantly wanted to roll on to see if he could win the lottery so he could get a high, powerful mage in order to turn his sister from being a donkey back into being a normal human girl. This is also funny because this is the first time we made custom tiles, and Zuper had to go through a lot of fun in order to find this donkey tile without, experiencing the glory that is Donkey Rule 34. Yeah, this is apparently a thing where humans get turned into a donkey and it's sexualized. Zuper was able to find a softcore version of this that did not include any apparent value of pornography. My character also had a little bit of softcore going on. She had a bit of a camel toe going on that I cleaned up. Jaden's character was the one, the only, probably my favorite character from Jaden, Dick Nose, otherwise known as... Oh no, this is Diego Hornswoggler. Oh, my bad. Yeah, sorry, Zuper. Your character was not Diego Hornswoggler. This was Diego Hornswoggler, I think. Oh, no. This was, Blackfire. Yeah, no. It wasn't Diego Hornswoggler. My bad. No, that was Campaign 3, I think. This was, Blackfire, at least I know by his last name, but we just call him Dick Nose, so Dick Nose Blackfire. And his overpowered as shit hat rat, named Timothy the Hat Rat, who is number 700 something. He's an ancient Blackfire, and he's had the same hat rat, supposedly, for many years, when in reality he hasn't. He's had multiple hat rats, and he's just sort of gone senile and forgotten the fact that he constantly has to replace his hat rat. So I assume he goes through the turmoil of losing Timothy the Hat Rat every single time, only to completely forget, get a new hat rat, and then just sort of accept it into his own club. Also, Blackfire has a book out called The Legend of Timothy the Hat Rat, or something like that, The Adventures of Timothy the Hat Rat. And it is very long-winded, very rambly, and it sort of details the life of every single hat rat. Like, I guess he's not senile enough to not have the part of his brain that remembers all the lives that the hat rats lived. and him along with it, but, you know, he existed. He was not a very powerful mage. The Hat Rat, though, oh my god, very overpowered. The Hat Rat had the ability to summon multiple Hat Rats, and each of those Hat Rats got the ability to cast a mini spell. And what they would do is all the mini spells would combine into one gigantic spell, and that would create a plethora of effects. So essentially, Jaden just drew a shitload of cards, and I sort of created a non-sequitur, nonsensical effect that was overpowered as shit, often did a fuckload of damage, and he actually had the ability to cast it a couple times per turn. I sort of started to limit him with how many times he could do that because it took forever. It was funny, but it also took forever. So there were a little bit of limits there. But other than that, there was the fourth character who was the leader of our little mercenary band, Jonathina, who was like the third time the Margaret tile was used. Although I don't think it's called Margaret. I forget what that pork tile is called. It's the one where it looks like wine is dripping from his mouth, and he has like the bottom molars that are like sharp teeth sticking out from the bottom of it. Like fangs almost. I forget what his name is. But point is, Jonathina had a little bow on her head. She was a female. She was very boisterous. Enjoyed the company of the crew. Enjoyed loyalty. I should also mention that Yuri was a boob fanatic. You know, playing on the word Yuri, which is Japanese for lesbian. I would say that Yuri probably is a lesbian. At least she enjoys the female chest quite a lot. But other than that, our characters essentially from this point onward tried to get back to town. They ran into a guy, I forget what his name is. He was like a Phelpsian Olympic swimmer that he helped us cross a river full of frogs. And what we happened across after we helped him out, we happened across his wife, who was also a shopkeep, don't ask. We happened across a very bloody scene. There's just a shitload of blood on the ground, bits of flesh, and like, we're wondering what the hell happened. And we run back into the Phelpsian swimmer. Now, the Phelpsian swimmer, I should mention, at this point in time had been looking through the woods and sort of passed out, but he was looking for his daughter, who had gone missing overnight. Now, what happened here is that he sort of assumed that we were somehow responsible for this bloodstain and that it was possibly tied back to his daughter. We were able to narrowly avoid a combat with the gentleman, and we were able to move back into town, which is the Woodcutters campaign. So if you know that map, we were able to move back into town. And from here, we sort of went on a quest spree where we started to talk to everybody, trying to figure out where on earth things went wrong, what happened, and what we ultimately figure out is that there was a fifth character with us. And though we don't know who this fifth character is, everyone sort of seems to repeat the story, regurgitate the story that there was a fifth character with us. And then the fifth character appears. And this fifth character is Emperor Palpatine. That's not his actual name. Not at all. It is one of the shittiest tiles I've ever made. It's just a Halloween costume. Clearly a real human in a Halloween costume. You've seen the tile, Sam and Ethan. And what this tile is, essentially, is it was a character in disguise, but I'll go over that in a second. He basically went around blowing up the town with his ability to replicate himself, and his clones had very low health, and if you killed the clone, they exploded. That was his gimmick. We were very easily able to overpower him. He was not really trying. Like, I wanted to make this an intimidating encounter where you had to save the townsfolk. Not many people really perished in this silly, if but strange, attack. The only people that perished were, I believe it was Trump and Obama. I think that was actually the name, like Trubama. Just like there were two brothers who had constantly been living on opposite sides of the same house, on two opposite bedrooms. They had had a falling out, and they finally were able to recuperate near the very end, and then they got blown up. It was like a tragic end for those two. I forget what their actual names are. I'll list them on screen because they were funny. But essentially, we were able to overpower Emperor Palpatine, which is what his name is, character number 5. It is revealed that character number 5 is Margaret. Yes, Margaret from Campaign 2. And out of the woods comes Sophie, Shake and Bacon, and Zuper's character. Just anytime I say Zuper's character, because I forget all their names. Bishop was his last name. Yeah, Bishop. He was the snooty peasant who was also a noble. Don't ask. They come out of the woodwork and they essentially enjoy, and they've been testing us in a sort of way of speaking to see if we're capable of being part of their group. Sophie has been sort of traveling with this group, just trying to get closer to the house, but she is also part of this resistance group that has their own goals. I'm not sure exactly what their goals are. I'm going to leave that probably up to Jaden since it's Margaret. But Margaret actually, well, I'll explain that in a second. So we sort of almost get into a combat with each other, but we all agree that in the end that the ageless transformation that Sophie has undergone is not that big of a deal. And we sort of recoup. The town, though, does have a problem with the ageless, which is a bit unfortunate. Though it's revealed that on the ageless side, there is a young girl who has recently become an ageless, and that character's name is eluding me, but it is essentially the female of the Phelpsian swimmer and the shopkeeper. Yeah, the girl has turned into an ageless, and this sort of pisses off those two pretty hard. And this is where things start to get hazy for me. I completely forget the reason, but essentially the little girl dies. For real. Like, not ageless anymore, she dies. Like, her skull gets broken. The Phelpsian swimmer, he also dies. And this is the point where the shopkeep, in a last-ditch effort to get revenge, this was completely unscripted. Like, we were not planning at all for this to happen, but she pulls one of her random treasure abilities, being that she's like essentially a booty raider, but more she's a shopkeep. She can use one of her treasures, and she pulls a spell scroll, or at least a spell, the ability to go inside someone else's mind. So what she does with that is she goes inside the mind of Margaret successfully. Margaret is unable to resist it, and she essentially casts a spell that blasts her skull in, effectively killing herself as well as Margaret. Margaret is the first official character that wasn't a wolf, technically, who was like a mainstay character who actually factually dies. I would not count Wolfie McWolfenson. Well, I guess I technically count Wolfie McWolfenson, and also by extension I can't play with Fire Guy, but that was like fourth character roles, and Wolf sort of left halfway through, although he left, I believe, around the same time that his character died. But yeah, Margaret dies, much to Jaden's salt. But it's okay, because his now favorite character is Blackfire. And ultimately what happens here is our characters resolve this. They realize that their main leader is now dead. We have 3 ageless, we have 3 people who are not ageless. Jaden was the only person who could turn people into ageless as Margaret, so... Well, actually, I guess the other 3 ageless could technically turn us, but they just choose, you know what, whatever, it's okay, we can just leave this as is. We'll just leave this town to its own devices, we won't have to kill anybody, let's just go. And the townsfolk just say, okay, just leave. And that's essentially what happens with that campaign. Sophie and Yuri head back to the house. I believe some of the characters just start following us. I'm not sure if Blackfire follows us. If so, I think everyone just sort of starts heading back to the house, because it's like, okay, well, this is an idea. I don't think Jonathina went. If she did, then it was probably Jonathina's resignment as a mercenary leader. I don't know. Maybe not. Also, I'm getting close to home, and I'm only through Campaign 6. Shit, I'm going to have to continue this in person. Well, I'll actually be able to continue this in front of my computer, so I'll be able to see some of the notes I've written down to keep track of this, but essentially that is the end of Campaign 6. They just leave. That's the end of that.